Imagine a nation yearning for hope and freedom, only to be plunged into silence and despair once again. This is the harsh reality for Afghans after 4 years of oppressive Taliban governance. Are we, as a global community, still paying attention to their plight? On August 15, 2021, the democratic aspirations of Afghanistan crumbled when the country's republic fell apart. As the final troops from the United States and NATO retreated, the Taliban quickly reasserted control, leaving the Afghan populace to grapple with an uncertain and daunting future. Despite their initial promises of a more moderate and inclusive regime, 4 years later, the Taliban has created a government characterized by harsh repression and exclusion, systematically dismantling the pillars of law, justice, and civil rights with alarming swiftness and effectiveness. As the Taliban fortifies its power, the world's attention has significantly diminished. Global crises in Ukraine, Gaza, and other areas have overshadowed Afghanistan's struggles, relegating them to the background of international discourse. Here's where it becomes intriguing. While the Taliban seeks to legitimize its rule and re-enter the global community, is there still a chance for the international community to galvanize and exert meaningful pressure on this regime? The Taliban's authoritarian rule. The moment the Taliban regained power, they cast aside the 2004 Constitution of Afghanistan, enabling their administration to function without any semblance of a transparent legal framework. Instead, Mullah Hibatullah Akhundzada, the secretive leader of the Taliban, governs unilaterally from Kandahar, ruling by decree without accountability. Women and girls have borne the brunt of the regime's gross human rights violations to such an extent that human rights organizations have termed it gender apartheid, arguing it should be recognized as an international crime. The Taliban's strict edicts have continually erased women from the public sphere, prohibiting them from accessing education beyond primary schooling, with limited exceptions for religious training, holding jobs, or participating in public life. Furthermore, women must be accompanied by a male guardian known as a mahram to navigate public spaces. Moreover, the Taliban disbanded the former Ministry of Women's Affairs, replacing it with the Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and Prevention of Vice, which serves as a cornerstone of their oppressive regime. Through a combination of raids, surveillance, and arrests, this ministry entrenches institutionalized gender discrimination. Ethnic and religious minorities, including Hazaras, Shias, Sikhs, and Christians, have also faced targeted exclusion and persecution under the Taliban's rule. In Panjshir, known as a hub of resistance against the Taliban, human rights organizations have documented severe crackdowns, demonstrating the regime's ruthless tactics, including mass arrests, torture, and extrajudicial killings of local residents. The erosion of civic space, the overall civic landscape in Afghanistan has suffered catastrophic deterioration under the Taliban. Journalists and activists have been silenced through intimidation, violence, and arbitrary detentions, contributing to widespread self-censorship and an information blackout. This chilling environment allows the Taliban's abuses to continue without constraints or accountability. Notably, even amidst these overwhelming risks, there are brave individuals, activists, journalists, and everyday citizens who persist in their resistance against the Taliban. Women have organized peaceful demonstrations despite facing brutal crackdowns, while others have clandestinely established schools for girls and chronicled human rights violations, holding on to the hope of future accountability. The dwindling humanitarian aid. While many nations refuse to recognize the Taliban as the legitimate government, certain regional players are advocating for a relaxation of global isolation. Recently, Russia took a notable step by becoming the first country to acknowledge the Taliban's authority officially. Other nations, including China, are strengthening their political and economic engagements with the Taliban, further complicating the situation. India's foreign minister recently engaged in talks with his Taliban counterpart, signaling positive shifts in regional relations. Despite international aid still flowing into the country, a recent report from a U.S. oversight body has revealed that the Taliban utilizes force and coercion to misappropriate aid meant for the populace. At the time of the Taliban's resurgence, the United States accounted for over 40% of Afghanistan's humanitarian support. However, drastic cuts to the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, under President Trump have dramatically decreased this assistance, threatening the nation with one of the most severe humanitarian crises the world has ever witnessed. The closure of healthcare facilities and rampant malnutrition are stark indicators of this failure. Mass deportations of Afghans from both Iran and Pakistan have only exacerbated the humanitarian disaster. The United Nations has made efforts to facilitate dialogue between the Taliban and the international community in Qatar to improve conditions in Afghanistan. However, these attempts have faced numerous obstacles. Interestingly, the Taliban only consented to participate in talks after the UN agreed to restrict discussions by excluding women and civil society groups. Unfortunately, these talks yielded no significant commitments or breakthroughs. Progress in justice. The Taliban's systemic violations of human rights reverberate on a global scale, raising alarms about a growing trend of similar repression, often referred to as Talibanization. In Yemen, for instance, Houthi leaders have implemented measures reminiscent of Taliban decrees, imposing constraints on women's rights and freedoms. While individual states might struggle to form a unified response to the Taliban, there are encouraging initiatives among international institutions. Recently, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Akhundzada and the Taliban's Chief Justice, accusing them of crimes against humanity related to gender persecution. Additionally, 4 countries, Australia, Germany, the Netherlands, and Canada, have initiated proceedings against the Taliban in the International Court of Justice concerning gender discrimination, marking a significant development. Furthermore, the establishment of a dependable, independent international investigative mechanism is imperative. Such a framework would systematically document and probe the crimes committed by the Taliban, ensuring that vital evidence is preserved and paving the way for future legal accountability. Without unwavering international pressure, the suffering of the Afghan citizens will only intensify, and the Taliban's brand of oppression will inevitably spill over to adversely affect women's rights and freedoms well beyond Afghanistan's borders. As we approach the anniversary of the Taliban's return to power, the urgency and importance of this discourse are clearer than ever. Join us for a conference featuring scholars who will dive deep into the implications of 4 years of Taliban rule, happening at the Monash University Law Chambers in Melbourne on August 15th.